because we find it so much easier to get compassion and have compassion for
Right.
someone else. Like you could tell me a story and I go, babe, I'm so sorry, that's really awful. And you'd be like, it's not that bad, so because
Right.
you're in between the sentences and also you've lived with it for so long. You've maybe, somehow maybe not made sense of it, but found a way to cope with it and kind
Right.
of switch between all day long, being triggered and back and how exhausting. So that's the other thing to say is that if you're struggling to find self-compassion for yourself, and I understand that, and I've been there and I get it and I see it every day, put someone you love in that scene and you think for yourself, if they're in there, did they do anything to ask for it?
Hi, I'm Kelly Namiro. Welcome to the Balancing Chaos podcast, a lifestyle podcast where we'll talk about wellness, motherhood, and some really exciting things in between. My goal is to help you develop a lifestyle that promotes health, wholeness, and success. Through my conversations with our experts and guests, I hope to inspire you to live a beautiful, full, and joyful life as you navigate balancing the chaos. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Balancing Chaos podcast. I am so excited to join you today with a wonderful, wonderful guest. Today, we are sitting down with Annalie Howling, a highly qualified performance coach with over 20 years of experience working with leaders in business, elite sports, and members of the armed forces. Her focus is on providing traditional support and empowering individuals to overcome self-imposed limitations, helping them to achieve their goals and move forward with confidence toward a more fulfilling life. What sets her apart is her extensive corporate background. Having sat on various boards, she is currently the only EMDR certified global practitioner who brings a corporate perspective to the application of EMDR techniques. This unique approach can greatly benefit business executives seeking to enhance their performance and well-being. As a sought-after speaker, facilitator, and podcast guest, we are so excited to have Annalie on the show to share her unique insights and strategies to help you navigate your challenges, embrace your authentic leadership style, and ultimately find balance into the chaos. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here.
I'm super excited to get to chat with you because I've talked with a lot of different, business coaches, professional coaches, and I feel like what you do is really, really different. So I'm excited to get into the technique of it all. But so you sat on corporate boards. So I'm guessing you did corporate, at least I know of that from researching your background, but talk to us a little bit about that part of your life and what made you do the transition into kind of this
Sure.
consulting role.
So yeah, I was, had all the stuff, had the big job, had the Range Rover, had the nice London and all the kind of things that you do. And then I also had a catastrophic burnout just before my 30th birthday, and I'll be 43 in the summer, so there's a good while ago now. But it was, I was trying to, like I say, do all the things and keep all the stuff going and kind of keep up with people around you and all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. And I really enjoyed the job element. I liked kind of what I did and connect. I had like a sales role, so it was business development. I love clients. I love building relationship with people. So that part of it I really enjoyed. But this is way before Me Too. It was way before flexible working, like any kind of genuine flexi working. And it was just like soul destroying. And it made me really ill. And I was thinking, you want it to be anything other than the thing it very obviously is. So like you or your listeners that have probably had some kind of burnout, whether it's a relationship, your job, maybe a friend dynamic or something that's going like south, you really just want it to be anything else. So I'm going for like gluten intolerance tests. I'm going to, like, I don't know, do all various things. And it's like, oh, surely I'll find the magic elixir and this will be the thing that fixes it. And it's like, no, babe, you're intolerant to your life and you know it, and you need to make some big changes. And that was
Uh,
it was. And so the transition happened because a really dear friend of mine, Nikki, who runs the Electric Woman, amazing coaching for women, any women listening, it's women focused. Like she's got some real high achievers that she works with. She was like, babe, let's do this coaching session. And at the time, this is like 13 years ago in the UK, coaching was quite woo woo. It wasn't like Wendy Rhodes had not been in billions, it was like, oh my God, what are you doing? Dream catchers, it was all a bit weird. And anyway, I had this session with her and it was so profound and it was so different to anything that I'd experienced. She did a guided visualization, and in it you meet your future self, and something that I would now do all the time with clients. And it made such an impact on me.
right.
And I am a type A. So I was like, right, I need to go and find out everything about this coaching. What is this coaching? What's it all about? So I got my ass over to your side, to the West Coast, to San Francisco, to North Bay, San Rafael, where all the coaching schools, like the homes, the coaching schools are there. And I like indoctrinated myself into all of it. And if I'm going to do something, I want to do it and get like a medal. So like, this is my office. There's gazillions of certificates everywhere because that is just who I am. I can own it. So I got into that, and oddly enough, you don't, I get overwhelmed. I'm kind of a little bit afraid around the edges right now, like just, but I'm doing things I'm so passionate and purposeful about. So that was how the transition happened. So I really do get it. I think
Yeah.
it helps with coaching because holy crap, do I get it.
100%. And I think that coming from that place of burnout and understanding that a lot of people who are making the decision to like leave a corporate role are feeling that way, empowers you to be a better coach. And I know that that's exactly how I felt when I was kind of making the transition in my career. And you look for every little, like, I love that you shared that, because you look for everything that could possibly be wrong other than trying to just actually do the thing that you know you're supposed to do and manage your stress and like take things out of your life that are causing you to feel overwhelmed all of the time. I think that that's a really good place for us to start. You probably haven't like talked about this too extensively on other podcasts and things like that, but can you talk to our listeners about what some of your symptoms and some of that stuff was? Because that's something that I talk about a lot on my platform when it comes to burnout, adrenal fatigue, exhaustion. Like, where I was at, I was like, am I losing my hair? I was so
Mhm.
bloated. I felt like crap. And I didn't ever tie it back to, wow, I'm working 65 hours a week in a job that I absolutely hate.
You're so right. I mean, what I can remember of it was like a sort of brain fog that it didn't matter how much coffee you had, you always had a sort of, you were always at least 20% off. And I
Yeah,
think a lot of that may or may not have been linked, since doing a lot of work holistically on myself, maybe to birth control as well and things like that. And
for sure.
um, I think there's a lot that you're just told as a woman, like, don't get pregnant, don't get pregnant, don't get pregnant, and like then you go and come off birth control. And I didn't have a period when I came off birth control for 115 days. I remember that because I had a
Wow.
tracker. And you're like, oh my goodness, okay, this is you get these messaging like, for heaven, oh, I think I might have hurt my arm, you might be pregnant, don't be pregnant. And then you try and get pregnant and you're like, actually this is quite difficult. And
Yes.
like it's actually this is quite hard. There's like 2 days a month, but you just don't. It's utterly bizarre as women, the messaging you get, and there just
Yeah.
seems to be no transition point between, oh my god, don't, whatever you do, and to, oh no, actually it is really really hard. I don't know why we didn't tell you that before. You're like, oh brilliant. So definitely brain fog was one. I had quite like IBS type symptoms, and
Yeah.
they really vary. And honestly, I remember that being so, it was really controlling me. It got to the point where honestly I was like, I used to do a lot of client entertainment in my role. So, and as part of my role, which sounds tremendous, the entertaining we would do would be in 5-star hotels and beautiful Michelin star restaurants. And I'd be in like the south of France and doing like fantastic stuff. And it was great. But if you're really uncomfortable and like you were saying, bloated, you're like, oh God, can I even begin? I never enjoyed a meal. I was always on edge. It got to the point I thought it might be sparkling water, like, or maybe it's air conditioning. I'd always take a pashmina with me, or maybe it's this, or maybe it's actually like, and it wasn't any of those things. Obviously, it was my system, exactly as you
Nervous
said. My
system.
adrenals was shot, my cortisol was through the roof, my hormones are probably everywhere. Didn't know if they were
Yeah.
turning on, turning off. I'm sure that I was, probably had a lot of candida, I would imagine, in my system at that stage. And you don't know any of these things, and you're trying to make healthy choices. I was training, I've always trained, I was working out all the time, not seeing results you'd expect, because of course my body is just in constant fight or flight, going, ah,
Right.
yeah. So those would be that's what I can really remember. I can really remember the feeling of never, of just always being uncomfortable and always being so self-conscious and like, please not today, please don't let me be unwell today, those kind of things.
100%. I relate to this so, so much. Like, I feel like I went through the exact same thing. Even when like coming down to like the very small details of like the birth control, the candida, all of those things. So I really relate to your story. And I think a lot of listeners will too. And so I think that what's really important here is one of the things that you pride yourself on is helping the people you coach and the people who you work with, like get past the limiting belief of like, this is my life and it has to be this way forever. And I think that whether you're starting your own business or you are wherever you're at, I think we all have those stories that we tell ourselves. So I'm guessing yours was like you know, this is my life. This is my corporate life. I have to be stressed. I have to work this many hours to make this much money. So talk to us about how you broke that cycle. Was there like a rock bottom, or what was that like?
Sure. So the industry that I was in was like property and construction. And this again was before Me Too. So it's very kind of, it was very male. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying to be mean to the guys. I've got loads of friends still, very, but it's harder on them actually. I think construction and property definitely in the UK is the #1 sector where men will take their own lives. Like, and it's like the worst sector for male mental health. And it is incredibly challenging as an environment. And I found it challenging because what I was doing was I was repressing all of my femininity to be one of the boys because I didn't want to be an outsider. I wanted to be accepted, and I wanted, and genuinely, I've got some beautiful friendships with guys, and I've always got on very well with men. So it wasn't a complete act, but definitely I was just armoring up and layering up and just being, just again, and then symptoms start. So then you start
It's like
trying to
that
ban.
very masculine energy too, to like be constantly going, constantly doing, never letting yourself rest. So I exactly see what you're saying.
And I find it easier to go in. We all have masculine and feminine energy and qualities, and I often find it easier to go into masculine. I often
Yeah.
find it easier to embody that. I find it harder, and I actually think a lot of women, you even if I dress like a witch all the time. It's my favorite color is black. But even sort of, I would say, more outwardly maybe feminine women in their expression, we struggle to be soft and receive a lot of the time. We struggle to stay in our feminine, and by that I mean the receiving of compliments, time, pleasure, someone doing something for you without you earning it first. Like I talk about this a lot, like, oh, but my house isn't perfect, or I haven't got a wax, or I haven't, like, and it's
Right.
just like, oh, I'm not perfect right now, and it's
Right.
I didn't earn it. I didn't got my bonus this week, or like this. So yeah, you're on this treadmill, I think. And I just remember, um, I also grew up in a household of trauma. So these are things that I'm now aware of that I wasn't aware of at the time. So I obviously knew I'd had a really shitty childhood. Excuse me for swearing. It's my
No, please.
I'm quite a sweary Mary. So yeah, like I'd had a really shitty childhood. So for me, part of my go, 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 you cannot stop drive there was no backup plan for me. Like I could not go home. I couldn't do an Anne Hathaway in Devil Wears Prada and like, oh, Andrea, do not want this, and be like, no, I'm gonna go live with my parents for 3 months and just fucking chill out. Like that was not an option for me. Like, there was no backup plan. The plan is you alone, babe, and you get this done. And so I was always chasing, and again, maybe of the time, but financial security was bricks and mortar, was buying a house. And so the way to do that is to obviously earn, get a wedge of cash for a deposit for a house. You've got a big enough salary to get a mortgage, and then somehow I'll be safe. I've got like a safe haven. It's mine. I own it. But that's obviously, I do appreciate now, it's a little bit of the matrix. It is a bit of a trap. But that to me was what security meant. It would mean that I did have somewhere safe, and I did have somewhere that was mine, and all the rest of it. So that's what I was chasing. And I have deep compassion for the version of me that was doing that and who was going through all this stuff, because I sort of knew it was for security, but I really understand now why I was doing it, and why did I let it go on for so long. And then I'd met the man that was going to become my husband, now my ex-husband. We were very friendly, it's all good. And we were having a conversation in the kitchen one evening, and it's a game that a lot of couples play, and it's brilliant, and no one gets to win, and it's called Who is the Most Tired? And you just go round in a loop going, oh my God, I'm so tired. I did that client event last night. And he'd go, yeah, I'm really tired. I've got to go in early for the board meeting. I'd be like, yeah, I'm so tired. I've got to go to like Berlin next week. Yeah. And oh, I'm so tired. I've got this. And you're like, and it just goes round and round and round and round and round, and no one wins. And I remember being like, we were talking about, I think maybe we were engaged, we were talking about getting married and starting a family. And I was like, I cannot do that. I can't have a family and feel good and like this as this environment is. And I needed to make a change. So that's when I had the coaching session with my friend. And that's when I was like, whatever this is, I want to be involved in this instead. And I also saw it honestly as a job that I could feel fulfilled in, but also as flexible, because it was not flexi working, certainly not in my industry and certainly not in my role. And so I could see that as being a change, if you like, a shift of industry, but something that I could still be valuable in, and I could still feel fulfilled in, and have the flexibility to have a family.
Did you have that right away when you started doing the coaching work and all of that, where you were working less hours and you had the flexibility, or did that mindset translate of like, in order to be worthy and valuable, I have to be going, doing? Did you have to
I
really
mean,
work on that?
I'll be completely honest. I hustle now. I hustle hard. Like I've
Yeah.
worked all weekend. I'm coming to New York at the end of February. It's fairly last minute. My life's always like, I'm very like, into the universe, opportunities drop in, I want to take them. But I think when you have hustled, when you're used to making things happen, like, sometimes even some like wonderful friends be like, oh, or, this thing didn't drop into my lap, and you're like, well, don't think it did to me. Like,
Yeah.
how this thing has happened because I've asked 25 people, and most of them said no and one said yes, and I don't stop, and I won't. I'm like, I don't know, it's and stuff like Miley. I'm like bang 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 because I'm almost more used to that. So hard work and the hustle doesn't scare me at all. I think I'm quite used to sort of, it's almost the things that scare me, like I say, are kind of relaxing and taking my foot off the gas. I give the metaphor often, if you were driving like stick rather than automatic, like, it's easier for me to keep the car in like first or second gear all the time, because the thought of stopping,
Right.
like getting out, and then the effort to start it back up again is like, that's too great. I'd rather just kind of keep this going. And I tend to do that, and then I'll take bigger periods off and be like really disconnected. And right now I'm in a bit of a hustle phase. But yeah, when I first started the coaching business, I set myself a target. I'm like, right, if I'm leaving this job, and I had a very, very good job and a very good reputation and I had really good money, and I was like, I don't want to have less. Like, I want to be able to make a success of this for myself and like be, feel pride and feel like I'm contributing. So I set myself up as a limited company, like a freelancer, a consultant. And so what I did was I was working for companies in the industry, but like 1 day a week for a few different businesses. And I was earning the same money because obviously I'm not an overhead anymore, so I'm earning the same cash. And then I kept 1 day aside for starting out and like collecting testimonials and working on coaching, and I did it until it tipped. I just did it until it tipped into a viable business.
That's beautiful. I love that. That's really, really cool. And is that kind of when you are working with people, it sounds like that most of the clients that you have at this point are past that point of like just the startup phase, right? They're not like in that early, they're like later down the road where they don't need that strategy of still having two jobs at the same time.
It depends, I guess. I mean, I think I also sort of feel like I came to this hypothesis a little while ago that I don't think we have anything like work-life balance anymore. It's so integrated in all parts. We've just got to look at our whole life and where it's either in balance or, let's be honest, probably somewhere out of balance. And how can we recalibrate that? So even people that I see that, I coach, so I coach very senior, usually CEOs,
Yeah.
leadership teams, equity partners. But often everybody's, most people in those roles, I would say, or have always got an eye on, maybe they're thinking they've got sort of 5 years in the career left or something like that. And they're like, well, this is what I actually want to do to fulfill my purpose now, my passion. Like maybe part of my purpose was leading this beautiful team of young talent. And that's often an answer. Like the reason that people that are very senior, the thing that fulfills them is the young talent and
Right.
nurturing and developing young talent, which is stunning. And I love leaders like that. But they're coming through that and going, do you know what? I've kind of maybe got the bits or the stuff. And usually they've been through some life events themselves, most people that I'm working with. And it's like, actually, I'm going to start choosing me. And
Yeah.
I think it's kind of what I was forced to do in my burnout. And it sounds like similarly with yourself. I just did it a bit earlier, I guess. I think my body forced me to choose me earlier.
100%. So I think that, like I said, a lot of our listeners, the reason that they're part of the community is because they are going through a similar situation where they do feel exhausted and burnout, and they don't know where to start to strip things away, where to create. I know a big thing that you talk about in your work is like self-talk and boundaries and like prioritizing relationships that actually feel good. And like all of those things contribute to our energy levels and how we show up in our work. So what is like maybe like give us like one or two, maybe your like top three tips of like, where do people start in terms of looking at, do we start with the boundaries? Do we start with like stripping things away? Where do we start to work on prioritizing ourselves?
I think I would look at, like, if I was going to make an investment in anything, I want to get, I want to do my due diligence. I'm going to get the information. So quite often with clients, I'll ask them to keep like a notes page on their phone, and just to notice if they start, say, like feeling familiar anxiety, which most of us do feel anxiety sometimes, especially
Sure.
if you're burning out. And you can start doubting yourself. Exactly. And I literally know the listenership and sort of what they're going through. Make a note of the places or people that you've just been interacting with. It may even have been a message. Like maybe it was your mother, you know, in which case, not saying never speak to her again, but maybe don't speak to her on a Sunday night when you're already feeling a bit low, for example. So just keep a note of, or keep an eye on, because it will give you patterns. It's like data. So with
Mm,
data, and then you might realize, actually, I'm getting really triggered. I'm feeling really anxious if I'm trying to socialize in the evenings. Give you an example. And so, do you know what? Right now, I just need to communicate to people that I love that I'm only going to be available on weekends in the daytime because I'm not feeling so brilliant right now. And in the evenings, I'm going to put in some things that I know nurture my soul, even if it's just frankly Netflix binging and whatever, you know, just like sort of get yourself level. So, but we can't do that. And again, and if you're monitoring it a bit like anything, you know, like if you're doing like an intolerance test with food, you can start seeing like, actually, okay, that is really, really good. And I do think as well, you know, putting boundaries in is a very trendy thing to talk about, and it can
mm,
feel very hard in established relationships. It's very difficult how to do that. So sometimes a blanket approach, you know, a bit like when we had the lockdowns, that was a blessing and a curse in many ways, obviously, because we were all put into a cocoon effectively. You know, you had people that you were bubbled, in the UK we call it bubbles, but you have people that you were kind of connected to and that you could spend time with, and obviously there was a lot of heartbreak in that as well. But it did give us, I think, more time and more information about those sorts of things that do nourish us and those that don't. And I think there is still a collective hangover from this sort of way that we've been fairly thrust back into society. I think we're not quite level yet. We're still shaking that out. So keep an eye on your triggers, keep a note on that. Also keep a note on the things that do make the biggest difference. So, you know, you could be like, oh, have a bubble bath and light a candle. If that isn't for you, then please stop doing it. Like the journal, I don't journal. I don't journal. Here we go. Here it heard it
yeah.
here first. I never journal. I write notes a lot. I'm very creative. So I'm constantly keeping notes about like a book I've read or a podcast I've been on or something like that. I voice note myself. That's hilarious. So because I get ideas when I'm walking, and
Yeah.
there's a function on WhatsApp that you can voice note yourself. So I often do that if I'm driving or walking and I get like an idea or something like that. So yeah, I would also say just really lean into the things that are genuinely working for you and don't feel weird about it. Like
Yeah.
I'm the sum of a lot of different parts. And this is the whole life balance piece with the other thing. If people think about themselves, it's online. If you want to do the wheel of life, it's a very old coachy tool, but it's online. And you can like rate yourself, different areas of your life, like health and fitness, family, friendships, work, energy. You can rate it out of 10. And it's like a big circle. And then you kind of draw a line around it, and it will be not an even circle.
No.
And in some areas, it's a very uneven circle. And you're like, whoa, but it gives you instant visual on, oh my goodness, look at the areas of my life right now that really are completely out of balance. But here's the other question to ask. That doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. So like, let's just say right now you rated friendships as a 3 out of 10. And then the question to ask yourself is, am I okay with that? And you might say, do you know what? Yeah, like I'm in hustle. You might say, actually, yeah, I am, because I'm building this thing for my business right now. I've communicated to them. I've got something booked in a month's time for a girls' trip. They know I'm going to see them then. So actually, right now, the fact that I'm like super antisocial and I'm just doing this, I am okay with that gap. You know, but you might look at something like, if I rated my child who is having a dinner in the next room, and you know, I've rushed around and, you know, and I put that low, am I okay with that gap? Absolutely not. That is costing me, you know. So
Right.
that's something that I would say is like, you know, look at the opportunity cost, like with business, look at the opportunity cost of these areas that you're rating in this wheel of life. Don't just be like, I must address all of them. Look at the gaps that you're not okay with. And
Right.
that, I would say, is a really great place to start.
I love that answer. I remember when I first started my coaching practice, I would use that tool just to like get clear with people and understand like what are your values? What's important to you at this season of your life, because it changes and it evolves and it like completely shifts, and you have to do a self check-in. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't necessarily do regularly, is check in with themselves and see what's going on. Just like what you were saying about the triggers. I was having this conversation with my husband. I don't know, even like a couple days ago, he's at a conference in New York, and he's like, I just feel anxious sometimes and I don't know why. And I'm like, you have to keep track of like what is making you anxious, because there's something that is making it's like, no, we don't just feel anxiety like and there's absolutely nothing behind it. And so I think that noticing those patterns for people too is also a really helpful tool. I like these like tangible things that people can take away and walk
Yeah,
away with.
it's really important you mentioning that. Like I had okay, what I say. So I had a client in this week who had lost a loved one and was there at the end, that had been quite poorly for a long time and was there at the end in a hospital setting.
Yeah.
And they get very, very triggered in airports. Now, one of the things, and don't know why, and
Right.
it can feel very overwhelming and they can feel quite out of control. And it's like, I'm all right with people. It's not that. I can go to, say, stadiums and watch games. And I'm going to, and the thing is, we have feeling memories. So, and when we're having trauma, our brain's tagging things all the time. And one of the things it tags is smell. So, like, say somebody walked past you and they had aftershave on of an old boyfriend, you would remember that guy in a split second. You'd be like, oh my
Right.
goodness, James, whatever. Like, you
Right.
just do. And we all talk about that. Now, one of the things that hospitals and airports have in common is they use industrial kind of cleaning products that
Right.
we wouldn't use. So, there's a high, and we talked about the areas and like what might be happening, and there's a very high link to, you're in an environment and there's the same smells, and we don't realize that because we're
Yeah.
not consciously there, but you can go somewhere and use like a hand soap or smell the kind of products that they're, the same, because the same contractors in the UK certainly are buying and cleaning the hospitals on contracts as they are at the airport. And believe me, the procurement team there is like buying the same stuff in bulk. So
Right.
you're going to be triggered by things like smells, even. And I was listening to this amazing podcast last week, Dr. Janina Fisher. She's fantastic. I'm doing some research on her work. And she basically is sort of looking at a new body of work around how if you've had a lot of trauma, it's not necessarily the right thing to do exposure therapy. Like the kind of, it's like, well, I don't know, you're afraid of spiders, here, hold a spider,
Yeah.
it'll get you over your fear. And obviously I'm using a very light example, but there's much sort of, I mean, that can be
Yeah.
terrifying. I'm not belittling it. I do a lot of work with spiders here. We get some horrible ones in the UK. So, but there can be things that people have experienced, and by taking them back into environments where it can be unbelievably overwhelming. And she's saying that at the moment there's this kind of a newer body of research that when we're traumatized, when we experience any trauma, it goes into our right brain, our right side of the brain. Now, so that's like your amygdala, it's your limbic system, it's the fight, flight, or freeze. It's also your creative centers, your emotion, when when you're triggered, when you're flooded, right? That's the right side. The left side, which we know is more cognitive and rational. Now, what's really interesting is the membrane between the two kind of hardens and really develops when you're 12. So that's when, like, when kids go into adolescence, you're like, you're having mood swings. Like, they literally are. They're swinging between
between both sides of their brain.
right. And then like kind of, trying to make sense of it. But this is so fascinating when you're older. So your husband was feeling really anxious, but because he's able to step into his left brain, he's saying to you, I don't know why I shouldn't feel like this. Maybe even like, what's wrong with me? Or you get people that go, and we can all, I guarantee you, me, the listeners, everyone, pick something that has happened. And if you told me it, I'd go, babe, that's really bad. I'm so sorry. And you go, oh, it's not that bad. Or someone else has had it worse. Because you're switching back into this left side of your brain. So we can be at risk of minimizing as well. Because we're sitting because when we have finished the trigger or the flooding, or we've discharged it out of our body, we're now sat back in the left side of the brain and we're like, oh, it's not that bad. I'll be all right. Complain again,
Right.
because if
Right.
we wouldn't do it.
That's fascinating. I didn't even that's like kind of, research that I'm obviously not that into. And I think that our audience will take that away and have a better understanding of themselves. So I appreciate that insight. I think that that's really, really cool. I want to touch on one of the things that you said kind of when we were going through all of this, and it was like, okay, if there's a part of the wheel where I'm feeling whatever, X, Y, Z, I'm burnout and I'm exhausted and I, need more time alone and I want to care for myself. Okay, great. So stay in, have a night with yourself, whatever. If a bubble bath feels good for you, do something like that, right? I think that where a lot of women, at least in my coaching practice, get stuck is I feel guilt, I feel shame, I feel embarrassed, I feel not worthy if I'm doing that because everybody else is going to judge me. Everybody else is going to think. So how do we deal with that worthiness wound? And I think that one of the things that you brought up is that there was trauma in your household when you were younger. For me, when I was growing up, there was like my dad is like a very successful businessman. And so there's like lots of pressure of like type A personalities in our house to always be productive and doing something and proving yourself. So how do we let go of that like worthiness thing and actually do the right thing for ourselves?
So there's a couple of things to do is if you notice yourself like that, and I'm absolutely one of those people, as I say, like relax,
Mm,
because for me, relaxation wasn't safe. And it sounds
right.
like the same for you.
Yes.
And for a lot of women, because we're rewarded on being a good girl.
Yeah.
Oh, Jenna, oh, Annalie will get it. Oh, don't worry. Oh, aren't you playing quietly and oh, you've been so tidy. Oh, look at you've packed those things away. What a good girl. Oh, look at, isn't she lovely? Or she's colouring on her own quietly in the corner. Look at her keeping in between the lines. Oh, you've done all your homework again. What a good girl. Or you're helping out with the chores again. So I am being a little bit stereotypical, but I think the demographic that's probably listening and ourselves, and like you're
Yeah.
nodding, like, this is what we were rewarded on. And then
Absolutely.
also, if there was any, like you said, dad was a workaholic and super successful, that would have had some stresses, like with mom and others, just, even good stress, but it would have been stressful and high energy. I'm like in a different, in a different environment, but I learned, as probably you did, that by people pleasing, life was better. So you learn how to please your parents, right? You learn how to please your caregivers. You learn that I didn't get, a beating if I didn't back chat or I was quiet and I didn't give them any reason, so being a good girl and whatever that meant for my household meant that I got a bit of so-called peace that day. And yours may have looked different, but again, and I think most of us as women have therefore not only been conditioned but rewarded on this. So the thought of being selfish, selfish enough to have an evening for yourself. How could you when there's a wash still to do, or there's, like you haven't put the names on the football boots or whatever it might be. And like, what did you not like home bake gluten-free granola for your children instead?
Yes.
Absolute lummy mummy slut you are. Like, but it takes work. I mean, it takes work to sort of unpick some of this stuff. So the first step is kind of self-reflection.
Mm,
That if I'm saying things that's resonating is like, actually, do you know what? I think that is true for me. I think I am struggling to relax, and look at it like a muscle. If I asked you to go and train a random muscle group, like, and you'd never trained it, it's going to take you a bit of time to move up the weights. Okay. So it's unrealistic. And this is again where I think we feel like failures. If I said to you, if it's someone that never relaxes and maybe has got some anxiety as well, and it's very hard to switch off the brain, and you're like, hey, do you know what? I want you to do a 30-minute silent meditation. And then,
right.
yeah,
It's
it's
impossible.
impossible. It's impossible. That's when we get to, and the reason we are doing things like scrolling and what have you is because we're trying to discharge stress from our system. So I would say again, like, the best thing you can do is start by being kind to yourself. And if that's like, do you know what? I'm finding it really hard to relax. That's interesting. Like ask us, that's interesting. What's in that? That's interesting.
Curiosity.
Yeah. Is it the environment? Would I find it easier to relax, in inverted commas, in an exercise class? I do. That's one of my favorite times, when somebody else is telling me what to do and my phone is off. That is one of the best hours of my day, like going to
Yeah.
do Pilates or personal training or whatever. Like that to me is pretty much non-negotiable, because my phone is down, and someone else is thinking for me, and I get to go into flow and just not think for an hour. And to me, that is like such an act of self-care. When someone
Yeah.
be, oh, it's really intelligent, you're doing all of this. No, that to me is that's my bubble bath, right? That's
Right.
my essential. Yeah. So I would say, like, don't again feel like you have to kind of conform to maybe like the Pinterest aesthetic of wellness, like, make up your own version of that. But really, this underlying narrative and where it may have come from is interesting. So the first thing is give yourself, the only cure for shame is self-compassion. So the first thing we have to do is show ourselves compassion for perhaps the times that we did say yes when we really meant no, or we didn't really want to do that thing or go to that party or that event, but we didn't want to cause a fuss and we just wanted to like keep the peace. And just understanding that that's kind of what we've done for a really long time, and that we might be open to changing that now. And that can be the first step. We don't know, don't have to the destination. What does that mean? What's going to happen? What's going to happen to our friendship? What's going to happen to our relationship? I don't know right now. We don't even need to communicate it. I'm just going to be experiencing a few things. There's a brilliant book, and I recommend it a lot, called Pussy, A Reclamation, by Regina Thomas Hauser. She's marvelous. She's based in New York, Mama Gina. And she talks about when she first went into this kind of work around like the feminine and, most people can't relax. And it was a teacher that said to them all in this class, right, I want you to go home And I want you to prepare where you live, like your apartment, like the Queen of England is coming to stay, right? Like the most important person you can imagine. So they clean the apartment, they get fresh flowers, they go to the lovely little deli and get that cheese they really like. You know, they put on the really expensive body cream that you keep in the drawer that you only get out for special occasions. And then of course, as you go through it, like the kicker is the most important person is of course you. But we don't
Yes.
treat ourselves like that. We've got the pot of expensive body cream and the $50 candle, and we don't light it unless someone's coming round. Like we've got what makes you feel beautiful? Is it wearing like matching underwear every day, even though it's Tuesday and you're just going to the supermarket? Is it putting on really expensive body cream? That's something that I do because to remind myself, literally, it's almost like a rebellious act that I am
Right.
the most important person. And the other thing to say that I think is maybe helpful is to differentiate between self-care and being selfish, if this
Mm,
might be helpful to everyone.
very helpful.
If you are being selfish, you are acting in your own self-interest at the detriment of somebody else. So you're taking an action that is going to be at the detriment to another. Self-care is when you're taking an action that is going to nourish yourself so that you're better able to take care of another. So they're very, very different things. And my daughter, I'm a single parent. My daughter's literally having her dinner next door on her
Yeah.
own with the one-eyed nanny with the iPad. Slummy mummy, so I can have this
Yeah.
conversation. She gets it. That could be terrible. We will have a lovely evening together after this and all weekend. But she knows that this is something that, and I know this is something that I need to do that makes me feel alive, that connects to all of my core values. And then when she gets me for the next hour and a half, we will play and have fun, and it's going to be super connected.
Right.
And it's not me being selfish by doing this right now.
And I think that when you look at it from that perspective, you're not only feeling good about yourself and filling your cup, you're also teaching her that it is safe and okay for her to do that for herself as the time comes, as she gets older, as she feels like she finds things that makes her soul feel alive. And I think a lot of parents feel like if I'm not like micromanaging and like giving them 110% of my time, it's like, no, because then they're going to feel like they have to do that for their kids. And then they get completely depleted themselves because they're not doing things that make them a better parent. So I am in complete agreement with that for sure.
Hi guys, I want to interrupt this episode quickly to come to you with a very exciting announcement. Now, I'm not one to usually highlight my birthday in any way, but I do want to use this as an opportunity to be able to give back to this incredibly awesome community. All of your support over the last 4 years has made Wellness by Kelly what it is, and I want to give back to you to show you how much that means to me. And the best way that I could think to do that this year is to offer one spot on our WBK 2024 March retreat. What does that mean? That means for 2 days, you will come and stay at the luxurious Red Rock Resort. All of your meals will be taken care of. I will be your guide through movement, meditation, and teaching you lectures on how to implement all things wellness into your life. You'll also get incredible experiences like a custom IV, custom essential oil blends, a really incredible gift bag, meeting some awesome women that you will create lifetime friendships and bonds with. And again, walking away with the tools that will transform your health and hormones for a lifetime. Now, if you want to enter this giveaway, tag 2 friends in the giveaway announcement post on Instagram. Follow and subscribe to my YouTube channel, subscribe to my email newsletter on wellnessbykelly.com. And if you want to get an extra entry, share the giveaway post to your stories and tag me. I am so excited to be able to see an incredible face there and get to meet a beautiful soul that I know will bring so much inspiration to all of the other women on this retreat.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about EMDR, because I feel like a lot of people don't know what that is. And while I do in doing a lot of my research and stuff like that for this conversation, and doing different types of therapy myself in the past, talk to us a little bit about what that is and what's so unique about it.
Sure. So EMDR is eye movement desensitization reprocessing or reprogramming, depending on where you're coming from. But that's
Okay.
what it is. And the way that it works, I talked a little bit about trauma going into the right brain. So when
Right.
we experience anything traumatic, our amygdala, our limbic system, the right brain fires, which is like our prehistoric brain, that sort of center. So when we sense danger, we elicit a trauma response. Now, what's really important here is that is so much faster than your prefrontal cortex, which sits, so I'm tapping the front of my forehead here, or your broca's area, which is language, I'm tapping the crown of my head. So those are like the shopping lists, what time am I picking up the kids, you know, like what meeting have I got tomorrow? Those are the sort of things that live there, like times, dates, rational information. Now, at the first sign of any threat, and I mean any threat at all, remembering that this could be a smell, anything that we're triggered by, and we're triggered all day, every day by various different things, including names coming up on phones, you know, all the time, sent to the amygdala. Now, all the blood therefore comes away from your prefrontal cortex. It's gone. Don't need to remember times and dates and lists and stuff. We need to stay alive. That's what's happening in our system right now. Now, this elicits one of 5 responses: fight, flight, freeze, which I think we've all heard of a lot. And then there's 2 more: flop, pass out on the spot, fawn. And fawning is one that is not discussed enough, but I think is so responsible for people pleasing, and also I think inherent in most society and with a lot of women, and I see it day in and day out. So trigger warning, but I have a lot of clients for sexual assault, if I can share.
Yes, please.
So when you are in a serious environment like that and you're in danger, and again, I just want to highlight the point, because people come away with shame from this, and I want to really make the point that you do not get to choose your trauma response. It's chosen for you. So you don't get to go, I'm scared, I'm going to fight them. You don't choose it, right? Your whole system is sizing up the situation, and it goes so much quicker than thought. That's the point. It's like the speed of light, your trauma response, not thought. No thought is happening. Thought center is offline. You're in this survival zone. So one of these trauma responses gets selected. Now, fawning is something that we do when the others don't work. So if I give the example, again, I'll be really careful. I'm going to give you a real example. I had somebody in here that it was a premeditated attack. They were actually going after somebody else, and then this poor person ended up in the situation. It was 3 hours long. Wow. It was a sustained attack. I mean, it was things that I couldn't even imagine. They were locked in a certain environment, and police have been in high court, everything. Right. Now, at one point during this horrendous, awful, sustained attack, this individual fawned, and by fawning, just decided, I'm gonna act like I'm into this. I'm gonna take off the rest of my clothing, and I'm gonna act as I want to go along with this. And they said, because I honestly thought I was about to die. So I just thought, well, this might be the only thing that I've got left. And they had so much shame that they did that in some way. And then I hear other stories. So, well, I did kiss him at the club before, or, oh, I'd met them at a party, or it's my brother's friend, or something like that, you know, or the other way around, you know, with guys, we had a few messages, or, you know, it's what people think it's a gray area, and it's not. So fawning happens when you are in a trauma response a lot of the time, and you're deeply unsafe. And in this scenario that I talked about, they were uneven in weight and size. They could not have fought them off. They can't run because the door's locked. If they freeze, that's not going to work out particularly well. Passing out is going to be even worse. The only thing left that this clever system knows is fawning. And if we fawn, if we go along with it, then maybe somehow I might stay alive. And that's literally the only thing that the system's focusing on now. Now, victims of domestic violence often report having very strong, pleasurable sex lives. You'd be like, how can that be possible? Fawning. And also maybe sometimes you want to like distract from like children if they're there or something like that. So they don't go for them, they stay with you. Fawning happens at work, obviously in a different way, but you can have a narcissistic asshole boss who's just like stepping all over your values, but you've got, I had a mortgage to pay. I had to get a house. I couldn't go back home. I had an evil family. I had a boss that did awful things to me.
Right.
He said things he used to say and things he used to do, the like Machiavelli tactics, the physical things, like the amount of times I've been touched when I didn't want to be, you know, and where I didn't want to be. And, you know, it's just horrendous. And I felt in those moments, I did not have a choice. So I may not have liked it. And inside I may have been like so furious, but I went, nah, and, you know,
Right.
turned up for work today.
Right. And so that's where the EMDR comes in. Is that right? Where you like are trying to dissociate from that shame.
With trauma, shame happens when is often left behind from these trauma responses because we don't understand why. And also because this prefrontal cortex is offline, it's very common when someone will say, I don't remember what he said. I can't remember. I can remember what he was wearing. I can remember what the car was like. I can remember what room we were in. I can remember the bit of the club. I can't remember. And maybe alcohol's been involved in some point or something else. And so and let's not be honest, we're meant to be perfect. So, and again, if there was a kiss shared or something, or, you know,
Right.
suddenly there's all this shame that you take on despite the very real persecutor being there. Now, EMDR works because you go into the memory and you do have to unlock the worst moment, which is horrendous for that. And you like relive it viscerally. So if you like, we're really in the right brain, we're getting all the feelings, all the embodiment, all the emotion, all the sensation, which can be deeply, deeply uncomfortable for people, but we're in there and I'm with them. And then when you use lateral eye movement, which is the EMDR, or sometimes I'll tap on hands, it's still bilateral stimulation. What it's doing is it's keeping your prefrontal cortex online. So that's what the difference is, that you're able, you know, we talk about the left and right brain membrane, both centers are on. So when both centers are on, you're able to complete the cycle, if you like. You're not just living in the right trauma brain, you're bringing on the resources from the left brain, like the facts and what happens is, and what I see is, you suddenly get people going, oh, it wasn't my fault. Like, there was nothing I could have done. Or, you know, I have a lot of people that their parents have passed quite suddenly and very traumatically, and they were there, and maybe they were either younger or something's happened, and they're like, there really was nothing I could have done for them, or it wasn't my fault. You know, like the when shame moves out the way, self-compassion can move in. And that's what EMDR does.
The first time I did it was actually not that long ago. It was probably like I don't know, maybe like 9 months ago. And it was like instant, where like the tears start flooding and you feel this like sense of relief and a better understanding of yourself. Like you're saying, like self-compassion can kind of come in versus thinking that it's your fault or blaming yourself or blaming the circumstances or whatever the case may be. And so what I'm curious about is for our listeners who are like, oh, I want to do this. I feel like if I do something like this, then I can kind of unlock a piece of my past that might set me free. How long do they have to do it for? How many sessions are they doing this for? How, like, are they doing other therapy with this? What does that look like?
I can't comment for anybody else, but I do it in one session.
Beautiful.
So it's always just one. So I can't comment for, I will caveat that in that this is for a post-traumatic stress. So PTSD, which is defined as 3 months after an event. So PTSD, you treat the incident as one event, if you like. If it had been within 3 months, you would treat each sort of stage or each element of the incident. So they often give the example of a bank robbery in the training. So let's just, you had been involved in a bank robbery and you were on the floor, and thankfully you were unhurt, but you're very understandably traumatized by it. We would treat, if it's within 3 months, each of the pieces of the memory that you've got very clearly, like, well, I was, you know, when I first entered the door and I noticed a guy, then you treat that as one protocol. And then maybe the next week we'd come back and we would do the, when you heard the gun, you know, or then the look of the cashier's eyes, you know, we would treat each element. Now, what happens with trauma and PTSD is that after 3 months, it kind of merges together. So you can treat it as one, because it kind of becomes not indifferentiable, because you still can remember certain bits, but it does sort of gel together. The other crazy thing about this is experiences that aren't yours can stick to it. So it becomes like a magnet. So let's say we use a bank robbery example. Let's say it's been 6 months. The memory sort of amalgamated into kind of like one, we'll call it. I would treat it as one event. But you could have been watching the news and they've gone, oh, Chicago's the center of bank robberies in the whole of the US. And you were meant to go on a trip with your husband. You'd be like, I can't go there. Like, I'm never going there. You know, you can literally read a like a book, like a fiction story on the beach, having a nice holiday, and part of the scene is that, and you would be completely flooded as if you were having the experience again. It does not differentiate. That's why I'm always like, people often feel like they haven't left brain. Oh, I haven't had it that bad. I wasn't a veteran in the forces. I can't have it that bad. It's not that bad. And you're like, listen to me. Trauma is a mistress that she doesn't, she doesn't choose. Like it doesn't matter if your trauma is from a teacher having you up in front of the class when you were 7, which by the way, a lot of people come to me for that, especially with public speaking now or things like that. That doesn't matter. That versus something else. It is what your system and your body and what you've stored. That is what we are working with today, and it's affecting your life. So let's get rid of it.
I can't remember who the person is who wrote this research, but there's somebody who like writes all about self-compassion, and one of the main things that they talk about is how like common humanity, recognizing that like we all go through these things, and like one story isn't necessarily worse than the other, or just because somebody went through something worse doesn't mean that you're not allowed to feel it. And I think that that's a really big component of it, is that allowing yourself to be with your feelings and saying that they're real and valid, regardless of like what somebody else's experience is.
When I talk to people about those fawn trauma examples, if somebody is listening to this and it's resonating and they're going to that, or maybe it's not that bad though, maybe it wasn't that bad, or they're in the, but I did do this, do that, or the what ifs. I always say, put your best friend in that scene. Put your best friend, or if it was a different age, if it was younger, pick a niece or a nephew or a child that you know, or your own child or something like that. You put them in that scene and you tell me if that was their fault at all. Because we find it so much easier to get compassion and have compassion for someone else. Like you could tell me a story and I go, babe, I'm so sorry, that's really awful. And you'd be like, it's not that bad, so because you're in between a sentence, and also you've lived with it for so long. You've maybe, somehow maybe not made sense of it, but found a way to cope with it and kind of switch between all day long, being triggered and back and how exhausting. So that's the other thing to say, is that if you're struggling to find self-compassion for yourself, and I understand that, and I've been there and I get it and I see it every day, put someone you love in that scene and you think for yourself, if they're in there, did they do anything to ask for it?
It's a really great way to look at it and to change your perspective on it for people who are struggling. I think that's a really, really important. Like if you look at like your own kid, like would you ever say that about, or if you're not a parent, like you said, niece, nephew, whatever it is. But that's a great way to look at it. So whether you are somebody who's gone through trauma, or you've been through some, personal challenges in your career, in your, with you're struggling with your weight, whatever it is that you're struggling with, I think we can all have those moments of like, I'm not good enough. This, like, I'm never going to make it in X, Y, and Z. And I know that you deal a lot with corporate. So why don't we stay in that lane and we can talk about that? So if somebody's saying like, I'm not good enough in my career, I'm never going to get the promotion, I'm never going to get the job, besides EMDR, is there any strategies that you give people, tools that you give people to get away from that habit? Because I think that the one thing, at least that I have found that doesn't really work, is like giving yourself those like affirmations and being like, I am good at it. Like if you don't actually believe it, that's not going to be something that works for you.
It's maybe a nice band-aid for like, I don't know, half a day. And if you're feeling good and you're on the up, it's like, yeah, like I'm going to get it today. But if you're not, it's not going to get you out of the funk. So no, I'm with you. So, I mean, there is a free masterclass on my YouTube channel, which is like understanding your inner critic, which is what this is, like imposter syndrome, inner critic. Yeah, I mean, in corporate, it's the thing that I see all the time. And I work a lot with athletes as well, like elite athletes, and they have it as well, because they're going out to perform and the eyes of the world are on you. But it's very similar in corporate. You're at the top of you're expected to be a fantastic public speaker. You're expected to do a wonderful presentation. You're expected to pitch the client perfectly. You're expected to be the best people leader. There's elements of expectation, I think. Now, something that happens is, especially on our origin story, depending on our origin story, we can self-sabotage. And a lot of this, but I'm either people like self-sabotage in advance. So then when it doesn't work out and they don't get the job, it's, I told you so, I knew it anyway. So if you like, the drop from hope to disappointment isn't too great, because the thought of the disappointment isn't too great. So they almost maybe say it so many times that they've kind of self-sabotaged it into the, we all know someone that's a very negative person, unfortunately, who they do it all the time, and you're like, so like that, but that's their almost character. But that's to stop any rejection or failure or
protection.
Yeah, but then you also get people who do not believe that they are worth it. So there's a lot of stories about, like, I work a lot with financial services sectors, and you can get a lot of people that earn huge amounts of money that probably or possibly did not come from that background.
Yeah.
And or you get people that get a certain partner or things that they don't feel inherently that they are worthy of. So what they do is they sabotage it in some way. So like in a work environment, they may not get drunk the night before a really big. Why would I do that? Why would I go out with the boys and get really, really hammered the night before a massive client pitch in front of my boss, or the promotions were coming up, or the bonus round was coming up? Why did I do this then? Or it's often stuff like that, because there's a subconscious kind of like energy and like the motors going, which is saying, look, this isn't who you are. Like the fraud police are going to come around and investigate you in a bit and be like, who do you think you are? Give me back the keys to the Porsche. Like, hand me back this apartment in Mayfair. You don't deserve any of this stuff. Back you go to your 2 up, 2 down, wherever it was. And actually, weirdly, in a way, you might feel more comfortable with that. This is a self-sabotaging belief, by the way, because you're more comfortable with less. So in that, this is about getting in touch with your inner critic and going, and you've almost got to give it like a dossier of evidence. So one of the best ways to work with your inner critic is to go, hold on, like, we're going for this promotion at work. Let's stick with work. I know we're going up against a couple of other people. I know it's going to be hard. I know it's good competition, but like, almost go through if you were going to put your CV together, but we've done this and this and this year. We smashed the sales targets, like, and even give it stuff that you've done that was nothing to do with it. Like, we've never run a 10K before, but we did that last year, or never thought that we would be able to go to that big party because I've got like some social anxiety and got through that okay, things like that you remind yourself, the inner critic, of all the things that you have done. Doesn't have to be the same when you found it and it worked out okay. Doesn't have to be brilliant, but just okay. Like, nothing, the wheels did not fall off, like nothing terrible happened. And I always say to my daughter, like, try and be careful with language and things I say. And there are some times that I can get quite like, like a little bit anxious about something. And I obviously try to be very mindful of that. And I just say to her, do you know what, honey, if I don't know something, this is the best life hack for imposter syndrome. If you don't know it, just say. And I just always say to her, do you know what, babe, I don't actually know right now. Like, I don't actually know, like, a road was closed and the sat nav hadn't picked it up. And I wasn't quite sure of the way, but I sort of knew. And I was like, do you know what, honey, I don't actually know right now, but I will figure it out. And she's like, cool, okay, yeah, and I did figure it out. And sure enough, you will. So I think just almost telling it that we're going to figure this out. Right. This is a bit pointing, but we're going to figure it out.
And I think the biggest piece of what you said there is like the idea of like building that trust back with yourself, in reminding yourself that, oh, I did this before, I did that before. That creates that real confidence versus the affirmations that are like that Band-Aid approach that you said. It's like, oh, I did this and I can trust myself in this.
Totally. And find the ones that you really connect to, like, and it could be years ago. Like, find the ones when like I did that gymnastics competition when I was 12 and I was really scared to go, and then I loved it, just the one that you've got a real connection to, right? Because it's just showing you that like, you cannot trust that voice. That voice is doing its job, and it's doing a brilliant job, and its job is to keep you safe. The only way it knows how is to keep you in your comfort zone, because that's the known. Comfort zone is the known, right? So as soon as we're going to break out of it and do anything outside of that, it's unknown, new territory. So your inner critic is like, well, I can't manage that. I can't keep you safe there because I don't know that place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to literally hang on to the back of your collar and pull you back to where I can definitely keep you safe, which is your comfort zone. And that is why whenever you're on the precipice of making a change, your inner critic or your imposter syndrome is jumping up and down on your head, and it's throwing everything at you. It's like, are you sure? Are you really sure? Do you really think you should go there? What if you mess up? What if these people see? And the bigger something gets, like say you've got a bigger audience, you're going to go and do a speaking slot, and it'll be like, but what if you do that, and then everything you've built will be gone forever.
So worst case scenarios, exactly. So I think you have to do that mental check-in where you slow things down and you talk to yourself, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, give it thanks, give it grace. Like, I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful for trying to keep me safe and that you love me. Thank you so much. But honestly, we've got this. And here's my list of reasons why. The things that we've done when we're in partnership, and you will feel it come down in its charge. It'll be like, oh, you're right. We did do those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Annalie, this has been such an amazing conversation. Totally different than what I expected in the best way. Because I think that you have this very unique perspective. Like I even mentioned, just hearing your story at the beginning of going through that like PTSD and that stress and that burnout and how so many people are going through that. I think this is going to be so helpful for them. So thank you for your time. The last question I ask every listener is, or every guest, I should say, is when you think about like life being chaotic, right? I think we all have so much going on. Like you said, you have your daughter in the other room, she's having dinner. Now you're going to go spend time with her. You like to do Pilates. Like what is your secret for balancing the chaos? Because that's the name of our show.
I'm going to say, so I always use the saying, ask me on a different day. And that's kind of my secret, because I know that by tomorrow it's different. You know what I mean? So if there are some days that I'm completely unbalanced and if it does feel a bit chaotic, and I just sort of check in and I go, do you know what? I'm going to park this. I'm not going to go down the anxiety rabbit hole that's very alluring.
Yeah.
I'm going to make myself a promise that we can do this tomorrow. And sure enough, by the time tomorrow comes, ask me on a different day, we're all good.
I love that. That's a great answer. Something we haven't heard before, which is great. Thank you so much for your time again. Where can everyone who wants to learn more about you? I know that you said that you have your free masterclass on your YouTube, so I'll link that up in the show notes, but where can everybody find you?
So the best channel would be my Instagram, which is at Annalie Howling, and it's howling like you're howling at the moon. I have a TikTok as well, which is at Annalie Howling. And then, the YouTube is Annalie Howling. And to keep it all in house, I have a lovely website, which is annaliehowling.com. And I've got a free weekly newsletter where I put a lot of this stuff, like the things I was talking about, and tips and things on there as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
I really hope that you enjoyed that episode. You can follow me on Instagram at Wellness by Kelly, or head over to our website, wellnessbykelly.com. Sign up now for the Wellness by Kelly 7-day free trial on our app, or head over to our course and now get 20% off the course or 10% off of the membership with the code Balancing Chaos, all one word, BALANCINGCHAOS. In our course, you'll get access to an emailed lab review plus protocols built out to help you heal with whatever hormonal imbalance you're struggling with. With our membership, you'll receive a library of content with our app with low impact workouts, blood sugar balancing recipes, and mindfulness meditations, all designed to help you balance your hormones and help you feel like you are living your most beautiful, joyful, and vital life. If you like the show, please leave a rating and review. That is the best way to help the show grow and get to more listeners. We hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next week.